Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old, and today I'm talking about the new album from Underfelt, Darkened Windows. Underfelt is the side project for Real Cardinal, who is best known for his work under the name Comaduster. Pretty underrated artist here. I've already reviewed his first two albums under the Comaduster name, Hollow Worlds and Solace. And I will link my reviews to them in the description if you want my full thoughts on those. Though the latter album, some may remember, was my pick for favorite electronic album of 2017 overall. Now, the Comaduster stuff is typically pretty loud and over the top and involves metal influences pretty frequently, but there were little hints in both Hollow Worlds and Solace that if he really wanted to, he could probably pull off a more toned-down, experimental, down-tempo IDM thing if he really wanted to. There were moments that he delivered, like Unfound, Ancient Generations, the ending of the title track from Solace, to name a few, that kind of gave me that little hint that it could happen. That's kinda sorta what he set out to do with this new side project under the name Underfelt, provide an entirely instrumental outing that focuses on the atmospheric side of his usual style, and obviously dive into the darkest of sounds he's explored. And hey, I'm all for the idea. As I mentioned in my reviews of the two Comaduster projects, the one minor complaint, if you even want to call it that, they did take cues from genres that I'm typically not that into. I mean, again, he found a way to get me to like these elements regardless, but diving more into his experimental side sounded like a good time to me. And let's not forget how insanely talented this dude is. Whatever he was going to deliver here was going to have some awesome attention to detail. I was pretty hyped for this, to say the least, so, what did we get with Darkened Windows? Okay, here's the thing. This album is obviously a side project, and definitely came off to me more as a side project. That is to say, it didn't feel like it had quite the same amount of love and effort put into it as the two main Comaduster albums. Now, that's not saying much, given how substantive those albums are. And of course, there's a ton of detail to be found here as well. It's not like he was slacking off here or anything. The sound design and attention to detail is very much there. But this does come up short compared to his mainline work. I don't know if this is going to be as strong a year-end list contender, honorable mention at best. Could just be that I set my expectations too high. It is billed as a side project, and I got what he said he was going to give us. But yeah, the dude did set the bar ridiculously high, so whatever, never mind that. So this album isn't aiming as high as a regular Comaduster album. There's still a lot of cool stuff here. Now, to begin with, I think it would be really misleading to call this project ambient or down-tempo or IDM. I mean, definitely involves elements of those and focuses on them much more than the regular Comaduster stuff does, but it still pretty heavily involves the same dubstep elements too. The percussion patterns are primarily the same as you'd find on some of the slower moments from the main albums like Chasms and The Voidless too. Lots and lots of various dark, bassy sounds of all shapes and sizes all the way through. Basically, it's kind of like his take on something like Plastic Man's Consumed or Closer. In fact, Closer in particular might have had some direct influence with some low-pitched voices in some areas that really remind me of that album, especially on the almost title track from here, Darkened Window. And the atmospheric construction here is incredible. Once again, the mastering job is really well done. Really going for that dark and menacing vibe the whole time and creating a really immersive experience for sure. That said, my biggest issue with this album is that it's kinda lacking in the variety department. Each of these tracks seems like just different arrangements of the same general collection of sounds. Subtle atmospheric pads, sharp percussion patterns, buzzing synths and sub-bass, squirty synth sounds, other various metallic textures. Every track seems like it was made out of the same ingredients, and they don't do much to separate themselves from each other aside from forming different rhythms and some other minor things. The only major exception is Before, which is the Unfound style break in the middle of the album that has no beats, just a purely ambient moment that gives you a moment to breathe right before delving right back down into the abyss of dark sounds you were hearing earlier. Everything else sounds generally like variations on the same sound without a ton of interesting features to set individual tracks apart. Now that's not to say the lack of variety is necessarily always to this album's detriment. It does certainly set up that feeling of just being lost and confused in some underground complex with no clue how to get out, and you're like just running around without making much of any progress. If the lack of variety was entirely on purpose, I would believe it. It fits for the kind of despair-inducing theme of the project. And it's not like there's no variety or interesting things to note at all here among the 8 tracks. Already mentioned the low-pitched voice that comes in the first 2 tracks. You got tracks like Shuddering Waves and Kuebiko. I guess they focus a little on the more energetic side, while something like Glassed Over is a bit more subtle. The track Mother Is In There has a bit of a beat switch up in the middle, where the rhythm changes up a bit more. The tracks Hope's Spires had a bit more distinctive set of haunting synth sequences in some areas. And yeah, I know it sounded really backhanded. I just feel like there's potential in this Underfelt thing that wasn't totally fulfilled. Right now, it sounds like a spookier and more subtle variation on what he's done already. If he was going for something more like Plastic Man's Consumed, for instance, the reason that worked better was because the framework for that album was so much more minimalistic, there was so much less going on, and anytime something changed, you could notice so much more easily. Here the soundscape is so dynamic and detailed that when something does change, it's not quite as eventful because everything else, there's so many things going on capturing your attention. Now, I'm not saying he should make his music less complex and dynamic. I mean, bloody hell, it's kind of one of the things that I happen to like the most about his music. But just kind of throwing that out there as an idea. And if he was planning on treating this project kind of like Clayton would treat one of his aliases, like Freak Gen, in that case, I still don't think he made this project different enough. Somewhat different atmosphere, yeah, but the main Comaduster project already had this kind of spookiness as an element and had a lot of these same sounds. I don't know, he can obviously do whatever he wants with this project. For what it's worth, I know I've sounded pretty lukewarm to average on this project, but I do still think it's really good. I still love the dense soundscapes and the dark and creepy atmosphere he set up with this album. I can see a place in my life for this kind of album. I just think there's still some more room for improvement here. The main thing is that I think he just had to put more effort into making these tracks more distinctive from one another. That's just my main issue with it. It was a bit too samey for me to call it a truly great project. And I guess if he really wanted to, he could maybe put a bit more effort in separating the Underfelt sound from the Comaduster sound, but whatever, this is still very much worth checking out. Dude is still mega talented, you still need to support him. I think I'm overall feeling a 7.7 out of 10 on this thing. But of course, this is just my opinion, you can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today, see you next time.